Yo to the yo.
Oh, everybody's ready to go tonight. I love it.
It's fucking Pantera night, dude. How could you be anything but ready?
Pantera night on the Talk Toomey podcast.
Damn straight, man. It brings an extra energy, doesn't it? It's not one of those where you're sitting back falling asleep waiting for the shit to happen.
No, man, the show is flying by. I'm almost an hour in, and it's almost over, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, dude, nothing Pantera ever sucks other than one bullet. So, I mean, holy shit. Fucking great.
Ouch.
Great to hear these tunes, man.
It's been fun, man. It has been fun. Chris Aiken, Classic Metal Show, welcome to Talk To Me live, uncontrolled noise, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. I guess we're talking Pan-fucking-Terra, huh?
Yo! Now you can use your redneck accent that I'm always offended by.
My goodness, we're going to talk some Pantera tonight.
Terrible.
I know. So what's going on,
man? Let me know your introduction into Pantera. How far back do you go?
Wow. Before Cowboys, I was living. I was in the military, and I was living. I was on Fort Ord, which was kind of Central California, right outside. It's like right outside of Monterey, and there were two clubs. One was the Stone, and one was the Omni. And I used to go to those clubs every weekend because that was where all the rock stars hung out. And I was just a big music fan. And I used to go up to those clubs only because that's where rock stars would hang out that were local. Like you'd go in there and see Zakk Wylde at the bar, or Jim Martin from Faith No More would be hanging out or whatever. You know, you would see these guys. And so I would see just anybody. It didn't matter. If they were playing on a Friday or Saturday night, I was going. I really didn't give a shit who was playing. And more than one time, I saw this band come through that I didn't know nothing about them except that they were from Texas. And every time I saw them, they kicked ass. And it was Pantera. Mm-hmm. So I saw them on the... I don't even remember what the last record was before the real record started, but it was... whatever that tour was, the what was that, Power Metal? You know,
yeah, Power Metal.
I saw them, and they were playing mostly those songs, but then they were playing like songs that they kept saying were new and that they were going to be different. And you know, the one I remember the most was I saw them like 3 times in that era, and they played "The Art of Shredding" 3 different times as the closer, and it was like they're playing all those PST 88s that all sound like Judas Priest. And then all of a sudden they would just come out with Art of Shred, and you know, I was hooked. And then, you know, shortly after, I had a friend that ended up with the CD of Cowboys from Hell, and I knew of the band, so I ended up having to trade him. And I still remember the stupid trade because I was such a dork. I had to trade him my 9 Inch Nails, Pretty Hate Machine, and Pearl Jam, and something else to get the Pantera Cowboys from Hell disc off of him, which was it felt like such a lopsided trade at the time, but boy, did it work out in my favor because I still have the original CD that I ever had, and I've worn it and every other Pantera CD completely out. So definitely, Pantera's my favorite band, much like yours. So love them, man.
Yeah, definitely my number one band, and I cannot stress on this podcast enough how many times over and over how much that band has meant to me, and it does come down a lot to what I was talking to Baco about a little bit, was just how personable they were.
Oh yeah,
and you know, when you met them, you were like, holy crap, you know, Dimebag's my best friend.
Sure. Well, you know, and being in the business pretty much most of their career, you know, I had opportunities to really get to know them, and I knew Dimebag and Vince and Phil pretty well, and I still know Phil pretty well. I still talk to Phil, you know, every time he comes through, and he actually, you know, I sent him a copy of my book because there's a Pantera chapter in my book, and you know, he and I have corresponded back and forth about that, and I know Kate is his girlfriend / manager fairly well, so. It really, they really were a band that treated everybody like a family, and obviously I had a little bit of different access than most people, but Dimebag especially was always the character, man. And you know, it's funny because I've had a lot of friends that know that I knew those guys, and they'll ask me, well, you know, was he different than the videos? And he really wasn't. I tell this story all the time. I interviewed Damageplan. It's out there on YouTube if anybody wants to listen to it. But I interviewed Damageplan in 2004, and I kind of pissed him off a little bit because I had interviewed Philip like a month or two before or something, and I wasn't gonna just, as much as I was friends with those guys, I wasn't gonna just let it go, because it was right when the big battle was, when Damageplan was starting, and they were both squawking at each other, each side. So I had in my pocket typed out what Philip had said to me about those guys, and I read it to those guys, and they just were fucking pissed. I mean, Dimebag was like, he may call it shallow, but this isn't shallow, and Vince was like, he's not, he's dope fucked. That's what he is. He's dope fucked. And like, they're just really squawking at each other. So it was one of the more tense conversations that we ever had. And I mean, I was literally sitting 4 feet from him, from all 4 of the Damageplan guys. So now those guys, they were sitting on like stools, and I was sitting on a great big old speaker. And at the end of it, Dimebag comes over to me and he goes, you're going to have to pay for that, son. You're going to have to pay for that interview. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes to the other side. We were in this big studio. He goes to the other side of the studio, and he finds another giant amp like the one I'm sitting on, and he pulls it over, and he climbs up on it, and he goes, let's go, son, let's go. And I was like, what the fuck? And he gets in the Karate Kid pose. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. So I climbed right up and got in the Karate Kid pose, too. And, a big fat son of a bitch. So it was it had to be an interesting look. And meanwhile, Vinny had the camera out. He's filming. And Dime goes, on the count of 3. On the count of 3. And I was like, I'm going to fucking kick you, dude. And he was like, on the count of 3. And we did 3, 2, 1. Boom. And we both kicked each other in the chest. And we both went flying off these fucking speakers, because you're standing on a speaker, and we both fall to the floor. And of course, everybody goes and helps Dime, and nobody at all helps me. But it was just how he was. And he got up, and we laughed it off, and and just shook hands, hugged, and was like, "At least you got the balls, son. At least you got the balls." I was like, "All right, brother." But, dude, I had so many fun experiences with those guys. I mean, just tons of them. I really, it's weird. And, I mean, you may know this, you may not know this. You have, when you've done this business as long as I have, I've been doing it since 94, maybe, 95, whatever it is. You don't necessarily feel like you're friends with too many musicians, but a lot of times you'll be like their friend in Cleveland or their friend in whatever city you're in. And I really felt like I was that way with the Pantera guys. Every time Pantera came into Cleveland, they would call, or they would, or send a message through the radio station or whatever to invite us to do something. And we always did, stuff with Damageplan. We did tons of stuff with Pantera. I've personally done stuff with Anselmo and the Illegals and Down, and I've probably emceed 15 events with some member of Pantera in them. So I've always had a close relationship with them, and I miss them a lot, man. I honestly don't have any. I have other rock and roll friends, but I don't have any that always treated me that good, and they really did.
Right. And I know this is a celebration of Dime, and I don't want to keep harping back to his death, but, you being in Cleveland and Columbus is just a few hours down the road.
Yeah.
How quickly did you hear about his death?
Well, dude, the ironic thing, and I'm sure I'm one of 8 million people that all say the same fucking thing, but I really was supposed to be at the show. I mean, it was only 2 hours down the road, and I was going to be going with my friend Kurt. And last second, I just was like, I wasn't digging the Damageplan very much. I just, right. I liked like 2 or 3 songs on it. I liked the Blink of an Eye, ironically, was probably my favorite song on that one. And whatever the sort of ballad was, I don't even remember what it was called. But, I just wasn't feeling it. So the thought of driving not the 2.5 hours to get there, it's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get there. And for me, the thought was my job started at 6:30 in the morning. So I was like, God damn it, we're going to be down there till midnight, then drive back. Then I got to turn and go to work and work another day, with like 3 hours of sleep. And I was like, I just don't want to fucking go. So I didn't go. And then I got up that morning and I had an email from my friend Kurt. And he's like, good thing we didn't go. Dimebag is dead. And I was like, what the fuck? And, I went to Blabbermouth, I think, the old Blabbermouth, and I think it was already there, and I was just like, holy shit, and quite honestly, it was a shock, it was sad, I won't lie and say I didn't fucking shed some tears, because, and Dimebag was like a friend to me, man, and it was tough, it was very, very... there's only been 3 guys that have died in my lifetime of music guys that I've really ever felt sad about. And that's Dio, Lemmy, and Dimebag. And Dimebag hit me way the hardest because I have so much history with the band and I did so many cool things with them. And, hearing that he was gunned down was like, how can that be? How can it be that guy? If anything, I thought it would be Phil. Yeah. And not that I would want that to happen to Phil either. I wouldn't want it to happen to Rex, who I can't fucking stand. But, I just was really, really sad by it, and still am. I mean, it's what? How many years? 15 or whatever now? And it's 15. It's still a bummer, man. It's still, I'm probably the lone guy that watched Dime Vision and was sad. Because I just was like, man, we're missing so much shit that would have been. Can you imagine? And I think Rita said this to me once, but it stuck in my head. Can you imagine Dimebag with a Twitter account? Oh my God.
Yeah.
He would be fucking hysterical. And just some of the shit he would be doing on Twitter would be, his whole life was a Twitter account. That guy was the king he would have been the absolute king of Vine video. Because that was how he lived. He was always joking around, and it was always 2 to 5 second pranks, lighting somebody's foot on fire or pouring water on them when they're asleep or whatever. He would. We're missing so much. Forget the music. We're just missing so much of the character. I don't know what the music would have been. I'm sure it probably would have straightened around. He would have found his groove, I guess. Maybe not. I don't know. He might end up being the guitar player in Hell Yeah, which that wouldn't have been good, but
not at all.
But
the thing I think Rita and I talked about that on my episode with her. Yeah. Talking about Dime having Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. If Dimebag would have had Instagram, like that would have just been a daily dose of just hilarity. And could you imagine a Dimebag Darrell podcast or something? He was definitely ahead of his time, not only guitar playing, but also, just in a visual medium. Because, like I said, he was always out filming everything. And that's why, when I sent you some tape of when I played in Akron fucking 20 years ago, you're like, why did you film this? And I'm like, it was because we liked Pantera. Right. And we loved everything they did. So we were going to be Pantera. We were going to film everything. And we thought we were cool.
No, and he was, man. He was so, I think that's why his legacy lives on. One, he's maybe the greatest guitar player that most of us have seen. I've seen Eddie Van Halen too, so it's a real close toss up there. But I personally like the style that Dimebag played a little more than Eddie. That's my own personal opinion. But he was unreal as a performer. But you know what? Eddie Van Halen's an unreal performer, and there's not very many people that just worship him like they do Dimebag. People liked Dimebag. People like Eddie Van Halen's playing. There's a difference. And Dime is universally loved, and he's missed. We have these birthdays, and we have the anniversaries of his death and everything, and every time it's a bummer because we really got fucked out of a lot of great years of great entertainment, and not necessarily just on a stage.
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit on the show too. When I was in Primer, we played the Ala Rosa Villa in 2002, and it was kind of a dump then. Yeah. And the backstage area, there's a little patio outside, and there was this rickety fence that was like half bent over in 2002. And I was just like, man, if you ever wanted to get into a show free here, you just take a running jump at that fence and you're in for free.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember correctly, that's how the guy got in. I was like, damn it.
Yeah, that's exactly how he did. He jumped that back fence and just came in through the side door, came around the stage, climbed up on the side of the stage and shot him. It's like, whew, just... And it's a weird thing, dude, because I used to go to a lot of shows there, and I've never gone back. I've never once gone back. I just can't... I can't bring myself to go there anymore, and I know that's fucking bullshit and lame, and, the odds are probably 9 zillion to 1 that nothing would ever happen again. But I don't think it's even about that. I think for me, it's more about the fact I don't think I could ever enjoy Prong or whoever it would be that would be playing there. I think I would spend half the time thinking about Dimebag getting shot, and I think I would spend the other half of the time looking around to make sure I didn't get shot. I think it's subconscious that, because I personally was that close to those guys and that happened, that I don't think I could ever see another show there.
Well, it's been 15 years, and anytime you see a tour itinerary and the Alarosa's on there, I mean, you instantly think, oh, that's where Dimebag got killed.
Yeah.
Or there's a photo of the Alarosa, you're like, oh, well, that's where Dimebag got killed. There's never been a time where I was like, oh, cool, Head PE's playing there.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, that's where it's always the first thing is that's where Dime was killed. It's crazy that place is still going 15 years later. Honestly, most of those, anytime something like this happens in a club, that club is gone. But yeah, they went, they I guess persevered or whatever.
They persevered, but I always found it strange and somewhat disrespectful that they didn't at least change the name of the club.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that I don't go is because I feel like I feel like they embraced that as part of their legacy instead of saying, you know what, the legacy ends now. And they should have. They absolutely should have changed the name of the place. I don't care what honestly, they should have called it the Dimebag Bar and Grill or something if you want to embrace the history. Get your pull rock bar or something. And something to if you want to celebrate the guy instead of carrying on, because you're right. 15 years later, and I don't care who plays there, when you see it on the list, everybody thinks about Dimebag getting shot there. It's shitty. I will never go back there. I gotta say that now.
Yeah, well, that's the truth, man. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time tonight, coming on, talking a little Pantera with me, a little Dimebag Darrell, and what song do you want me to end you out with?
Suicide Note Part 2, nice and mellow.
Oh, great album. It's funny, Baco was talking about they kind of peaked on Far Beyond Driven, and with me, I thought that they kept going, and I think that The Great Southern Trendkill is highly, highly underrated.
It's my favorite record of everything they did. I just love the heaviness of it, and the it's just straight brutality. I honestly think it had a lot to do with that's where Philip was. He was trying to get into all his death metal bands because that was when he had like Necrophagia and everything else going on. And he was also working, and I believe he worked on this album. Seth Putnam from Anal Cunt was on like a bunch of these songs, and then Phil repaid the favor they put out some album. Don't ask me what it was called, but right at the same time, Anal Cunt did, and it had like 40 tracks, and Phil was on like 22 of them. So, they were like friends that were working together, but they were so heavy, and just listening to Dime play. That's the one time that Dimebag really went and played a different style of guitar. Was on Trendkill, and he proved that he could play any style when he did that because those songs are just so brutal, so good.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Suicide Note Part 1 into Suicide Note Part 2 because you can't have one without the other, Chris.
All right,
so
that works.
We will do that now, and Classic Metal Show, make sure you guys check that out. I know you already are.
Yep. With
their 6 million downloads they have. So
nice.
I appreciate you, man.
Hey, man, good being on, man.
All right, take care.
All right, later.